On the evening of September 2, 2015, Dr. Kendra Hatcher pulled her car into the parking garage of her apartment building, the Gables Park 17, in the uptown neighborhood of Dallas. It was just before 8 p.m. The 35-year-old pediatric dentist was returning from work, likely thinking about her plans. She and her boyfriend, a dermatologist named Ricardo Paniagua, were preparing for a trip to Mexico that weekend. After that, they were set to begin a new chapter together, moving to San Francisco. As she parked her vehicle in the secure, gated garage, she had no reason to suspect she wasn't safe. But she wasn't alone. Within moments, witnesses heard a single gunshot. When police arrived, they found Kendra Hatcher deceased next to her car. The question investigators faced was not a random act of violence. They would soon uncover a plot so calculated, so driven by personal obsession, that it would lead them from the streets of Dallas to an international manhunt and onto the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. The initial investigation into Kendra Hatcher's death revealed a scene that was both confusing and alarming. There was no sign of a struggle, but witnesses had seen a dark-colored Jeep Cherokee acting suspiciously in the garage just before the shooting. The vehicle had tailgated another car through the security gate, a common method of gaining access to a controlled space. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage of the Jeep and, with few leads to go on, made a critical decision. They released the image to the media, hoping the public could identify the vehicle. It was a gamble that paid off almost immediately. A man named Jose Ortiz saw the news broadcast and recognized the Jeep. It was his. He told police that on the morning of the murder, he had loaned it to two women: his friend, Brenda Delgado, and another woman, Crystal Cortez. Ortiz explained that the women had shown up at his auto shop driving a gold BMW. They claimed Cortez's car was having mechanical issues and asked to borrow his Jeep for the day, leaving the BMW with him as a temporary exchange. It seemed like a simple favor between acquaintances. But Jose Ortiz's story didn't end there. He told detectives that after seeing his Jeep on the news, he immediately confronted Brenda Delgado. Her reaction was not what one would expect from an innocent person. According to Ortiz, Delgado first tried to convince him it wasn't his vehicle in the footage. When that didn't work, she offered a different explanation, saying that Cortez had used the Jeep to go buy drugs for someone, and that something must have gone wrong. Then, Delgado's suggestions took a more sinister turn. She allegedly told Ortiz not to answer his phone if Crystal Cortez called. She warned him to keep quiet about the whole thing, telling him he could get in trouble with the police and even risk his citizenship status. Most damning of all, Ortiz testified that Delgado advised him to hide the Jeep, suggesting he paint it a different color, and even offered to help pay for the paint job. Instead of following this advice, Jose Ortiz went to the police, and his information cracked the case wide open. By September 4th, just 2 days after the murder, Crystal Cortez was arrested and charged with capital murder. In her confession to police, Crystal Cortez laid out a chilling narrative. She admitted to being the driver of the Jeep Cherokee on the night of the murder. She told detectives she had been paid $500 by Brenda Delgado to drive a man to the parking garage for what she claimed she believed was going to be a robbery. That man, she said, was the shooter. Police soon identified him as 32-year-old Christopher Love, a convicted felon with a prior record for aggravated assault and robbery. Love was arrested and also charged with capital murder. But as the investigation deepened, it became clear that Cortez was far more than just an uninformed driver for hire. The robbery story began to fall apart, revealing a meticulously planned murder for hire, with Brenda Delgado as its architect. The motive, investigators would later assert, was jealousy. Brenda Delgado and Dr. Ricardo Paniagua had been in an on-again, off-again relationship for about 2 years, which had ended earlier in 2015. When Paniagua began dating Kendra Hatcher, a successful and vibrant pediatric dentist, it seemed Delgado could not let go. Evidence presented at trial would show that Delgado was monitoring Paniagua's movements. According to court testimony, she had access to his iCloud account, which allowed her to track his location and even see that he had purchased plane tickets for a trip to Mexico with Hatcher. The timing was critical. The couple was not only going on vacation but also planning to move to San Francisco together after the Labor Day weekend. prosecutors would argue that Delgado saw this as her last chance to act, to remove Kendra Hatcher from the picture before she slipped away for good. The planning of the murder was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. According to testimony from Crystal Cortez, who later accepted a plea deal in exchange for her cooperation, she and Delgado spent days preparing. They surveilled Kendra Hatcher, following her on her daily routine. They watched her at her dental practice from across the street, using binoculars from a Salvation Army parking lot. They followed her to her apartment garage, learning how to slip in behind resident cars. They even conducted a dry run the day before the murder, driving the route from the shooter's apartment to Hatcher's work and then to her home to time it all out. Delgado and Cortez also took steps to cover their tracks. They stole a temporary paper license plate from another vehicle in an apartment complex to put on the Jeep. They acquired gloves, syringes, and disinfectant wipes from the dental office where Delgado worked, seemingly to avoid leaving forensic evidence. When it came to acquiring a weapon, they initially tried to buy a gun themselves but worried it would be traced back to them. Instead, Christopher Love obtained a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun. Cortez testified that she and Delgado discussed the need for a silencer, and phone records later revealed a video on Delgado's phone from late August that captured a conversation about just such a device. As the plan came together, the roles were defined. Love would be the shooter, Cortez would be the driver, and Brenda Delgado, they said, was the paymaster. Cortez testified that Delgado promised her money and promised Love a combination of cash and drugs, even claiming connections to a drug cartel to make the offer more enticing. On the day of the murder, the sequence of events was clinical. They picked up Love, swapped cars with Jose Ortiz to get the untraceable Jeep, and then dropped Delgado off at a public library in Carrollton, a suburb north of Dallas. This provided her with an alibi, a way to be seen in public while the murder was carried out. From there, Cortez and Love drove to Kendra Hatcher's apartment. They waited. When she arrived, Love got out, approached her, and shot her. The Jeep sped away. The murder, staged to look like a robbery, was complete. With the arrests of Cortez and Love, the net was closing in on Brenda Delgado. Police questioned her in the days following the murder, but at that time, they lacked sufficient evidence to hold her, and she was released. By the time a warrant was issued for her arrest on a capital murder charge in October 2015, she was gone. Delgado had fled to Mexico, her country of birth, disappearing into the vast landscape and triggering a massive manhunt. The case took on a new dimension of urgency and notoriety. On April 6, 2016, with Delgado still at large after more than 6 months, the Federal Bureau of Investigation added her to its prestigious and infamous 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. She was only the 9th woman ever to be placed on the list since its inception in 1950. The FBI offered a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading directly to her capture, describing her as a master manipulator. The publicity was international, and the pressure was immense. Kendra Hatcher's mother, Bonnie Jameson, made a public plea, her voice heavy with grief. "She was just one amazing little gal. Let me tell you," she said of her daughter. "The only thing that I want is Delgado back and her to serve justice. That is the only thing that I think about." Just 2 days after being placed on the Most Wanted list, on April 8, 2016, Mexican authorities arrested Brenda Delgado in the city of Torreon, Coahuila. She was found living under an assumed name. Her arrest ended the international flight, but it was just the beginning of a long legal process. Because she was captured in Mexico and the United States sought her extradition, an agreement was reached with Mexican authorities that had a significant consequence. Delgado would not be eligible for the death penalty. She would be tried for capital murder, but if convicted, the only possible sentence would be life in prison without the possibility of parole. While Delgado awaited trial, the legal proceedings against the other two unfolded. In October 2018, Christopher Love was convicted of capital murder for his role as the triggerman. The jury, hearing the details of the execution-style killing, sentenced him to death by lethal injection. Kendra Hatcher's family addressed him directly in court. Her mother, Bonnie Jameson, said, "You didn't shoot her. You executed my daughter for absolutely no reason in the world." Crystal Cortez, who had cooperated extensively with prosecutors, testified against both Love and later Delgado. In exchange for her cooperation and her guilty plea, she was sentenced in June 2019 to 35 years in prison for her role in the murder. Her attorneys had maintained she believed the plan was only a robbery, but her deep involvement in the planning and surveillance made that claim a point of contention. Finally, in late May and early June of 2019, nearly 4 years after Kendra Hatcher was killed, Brenda Delgado stood trial in a Dallas County courtroom. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. It was built on a foundation of physical evidence, surveillance footage, cell phone data placing Delgado with her co-conspirators, and the powerful testimony of Crystal Cortez. The jury also heard from 3 separate witnesses who testified that Delgado had approached them, asking if they knew someone who could take care of Kendra Hatcher. Perhaps most damaging was Delgado's own filmed police interview from the days after the murder, in which she lied repeatedly to investigators, lies that were later exposed by the evidence. The defense, led by attorney George Milner, attempted to discredit Crystal Cortez, portraying her as the true manipulator who cut a deal to save herself. Milner called her 35-year sentence the deal of the century and argued she would say anything for leniency. But the jury saw it differently. One juror, who later wrote about the experience, noted that the more the defense tried to trip up Cortez, the clearer her testimony became. He observed that the plea deal, a 35-year prison sentence for a young mother, did not seem like a bargain, but rather a person beginning to face the consequences of her horrifying actions. The trial was swift and efficient. The prosecution laid out its case methodically. On June 7, 2019, after less than 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, guilty of capital murder. Brenda Delgado, the woman who orchestrated the murder of her romantic rival from a distance, showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Before her automatic sentence of life in prison without parole was formally delivered, the courtroom heard victim impact statements. Kendra Hatcher's mother, Bonnie Jameson, once again spoke, her words a mixture of profound loss and unwavering faith. She addressed Delgado directly, saying, "We take comfort in knowing our God has given our Kendra the ultimate spot in heaven. A spot in which you will never see. You, Brenda Delgado, have earned your spot on this earth behind cold steel bars for the rest of your miserable, pathetic life." Kendra's sister, Ashley Turner, echoed the sentiment, her voice filled with anger and grief. "No matter how envious you were of any human being, it does not give you the right to destroy lives," she said. "Many lives, your own family's lives, our lives, Kendra's life, my children's lives. Who the hell do you think you are, Brenda?" The murder of Kendra Hatcher is a case study in the destructive power of obsession. It was a plan born not of passion in a moment of conflict, but of cold, calculated envy, nursed over weeks and executed with the help of others who were bought for a relative pittance. The investigation, which moved with remarkable speed thanks to a public tip and the cooperation of a key witness, exposed a conspiracy that was shocking in its scope. The subsequent manhunt and trial brought a measure of legal resolution, but for the family and friends of Kendra Hatcher, the loss is permanent. Kendra Hatcher was described by those who loved her as a vibrant, accomplished woman. A pediatric dentist, she was known for her kindness, her skill with children, and her love of life. She was 35 years old, with a thriving practice and a future full of promise when it was taken from her in a matter of seconds in a parking garage. Her mother's simple plea for justice, for Delgado to be brought back to face the consequences, was ultimately answered. The case serves as a grim reminder that violence can sometimes stem from the most personal and seemingly ordinary human emotions: jealousy, rejection, and a refusal to let go, twisted into something unrecognizable and deadly. Brenda Delgado, Christopher Love, and Crystal Cortez are all behind bars. Kendra Hatcher, the one person in this story guilty of nothing more than falling in love, is gone.